Zeke and Sarah continued up the mountain towards the ski lodge, where both their wrists were tied with some rope. They weren't sure how they were going to get out of this situation. This was made worse by the fact that they were getting closer and closer to the ski lodge. "What do we do?" Sarah whispered. "I don't know," Zeke whispered. "Hey, shut the fuck up," Troy snapped. "Troy, quiet. We're getting close to the ski lodge. We don't need you announcing our position, dumbass," Johnny said. "Screw you," Troy snapped. Carver cleared his throat. Sarah and Zeke looked back at their four captors that had stopped. Carver had gunned and aimed and pressed to the back of Troy's head. "You either shut your damn mouth, or your brains are going to be splattered all over them in the ground," Carver said. Troy backed down and he said, "Okay, boss. That's better. Enough of your stupidity," Carver said. "We're so this frickin' close, and I'm letting their air slip through my fingers again." He turned back to Zeke and Sarah. "Keep moving." Having no choice, the two teenagers just kept walking. Zeke could tell that Carver was more unhinged compared to one last time. Zeke wasn't so sure what Carver was capable of now. They were approaching the clearing to see Luke, Nick, and Carlos looking all over the weapons that were left behind by Zeke. They looked up to see the teenagers approaching them. "Where have you been? We were," Carlos said, but he trailed off once Carver came out of the forest with his guards. "They seem like good kids," Carver said. "They did a good job of doing what they were told. It'd be a shame if something happened to them." He raised his handgun and aimed it at Sarah. Sarah gripped Zeke's hand with a tight grip out of fear of being shot. He could tell that she was breathing heavily and was on the verge of crying. He figured that the other of the guards had a gun aimed at him. "Don't, please," Carlos said as he appeared to be scared. He didn't want his daughter to die in front of him. "Carver, this is between you and us, not them. Just let them go," Luke said. "I'm afraid I can't do that," Carver said. "You know, originally I was just going to leave you all alone. All I wanted was Clementine. And then this happened." A scowl formed on his face as he continued. "He marched over out there in the middle of nowhere. He hid away from me, hindered her growth, and now you went out of your way to get away from me? She's coming with me, and the rest of you will work your asses off until the day you die. I certainly hope it was worth it." Luke shook his head. "You don't get it, do you?" Luke said. "She doesn't want to lead your community, and she doesn't want you as her father. She has a family now, and she's all she wants right now is to live with her adoptive family and be a normal kid. Honorable statement, but whatever she chooses to accept it or not, she is my heir. Now take me to her, or these two will end up dead," Carver said as he gestured to Zeke and Sarah. "Wait, Bill, you can't do this. They're just a couple of kids," Bonnie said. "As I said before, their group's actions will decide whenever they live or not," Carver said. "So what is it going to be, Luke?" After a couple of seconds passed before Luke released a sigh. "All right, come on." He turned to lead the way to the ski lodge. "Carver, please let my daughter go," Carlos said. "You got what you wanted." "No, I'll have her and the boys stay with me for the time being. Hopefully for their sakes, the rest of your people will cooperate as much as you have," Carver said with a huge smile on his face. Carlos grumbled in response while clutching his teeth. He balled up his fists and looked at Carver with a glare. "Want to punch me? Go ahead. It'll be the last thing your little girl will ever see," Carver said. "I hate you," Carlos spat, sounding furious. "Come on, Carlos. We don't have a choice," Luke said. He was looking back at the man with a defeated look on his face. Nick followed Luke. There wasn't really much he could also do given the situation. Carlos shook his head before stomping away from Carver. He joined Luke and Nick, and the three made their way in the ski lodge. Zeke could tell that Nick was drunk, as he was wobbling back and forth as he walked. He also noticed that Carlos would also look back to check on Sarah. It wasn't long until they reached the entrance of the ski lodge. Luke opened the door and allowed Carver, Bonnie, Troy, and Johnny to enter with Zeke and Sarah, still being held at gunpoint. Luke, Nick, and Carlos both entered the closed doors behind them. Luke led the way upstairs, with everyone else following him. The ski lodge felt so warm compared to the bitter cold from outside. It was so peaceful. Too bad the peace was about to be shattered. Kenny walked over. He seemed very angry upon seeing Carver and his people. "What the fuck is going on here? Who the hell are these ass clowns?" Carver stepped forward and he said, "It's such a shame you got involved. You and everyone in here will surrender unless you want these two to die. He gestured to Zeke and Sarah. You are the son of a bitch that's been after Clem, Kenny snapped. It was easy to see that he was getting angrier. The clock is ticking. Either you surrender or one of them dies, Carver said with a scowl forming his face. You think I give a shit? Kenny snapped. Before he landed a punch on Carver, Carver stumbled from the punch that was followed by Kenny throwing another punch. However, Carver caught the punch with one of his hands and he punched Kenny in the gut. Kenny groaned from the pain from the punch before Carver delivered another punch to the face. Kenny stumbled before regaining his balance and he threw yet another punch. Carver retaliated by hitting Kenny in the gut again, which followed him picking up Kenny and slamming him onto the ground. Kenny yelled out in pain, which was followed by him groaning. Carver huffed as he got back up from the throw. He was angry and looked up at Zeke and Sarah. Kill the boy, he ordered. No! Sarah exclaimed. She held on to him and started to cry. Zeke wasn't sure what to do. Everything happened so fast. He heard someone running towards him. He heard the gunshot and he thought for sure he was dead, but he wasn't. Sarah continued to sob as she held on to him for dear life. He managed to turn his head just enough to see Nick on the ground. Blood was coming out of his mouth and his chest wasn't moving. Zeke knew what happened. Nick had took the bullet for him. Oh my gosh, Bonnie said as she covered her mouth with her hand, and her eyes were full of horror. Nick, Luke muttered. He started to breathe heavily, as well before he ran over him. Nick, come on, man, Nick! He tried to give him CPR, but that didn't seem to work. Zeke noticed that Sarita, Matthew, Walter, Rebecca, Alvin, and Clementine gathered into the main room just a few seconds after the gunshot went off. Stupid jackass deserved it, Troy hissed. He was behind Zeke. He must have fired the shot. Troy aimed his rifle at Zeke, ready to make another shot. Oh no. That would be enough to convince the rest of the cripple fuckers not to mess with us, Carver said. Troy grumbled before lowering his gun. Rebecca sent a sympathetic look to Luke before she handed Genevieve off to Alvin, and she went over to Carver and said, What the hell is wrong with you? Rebecca, sweetie, I miss you, Carver said with a smirk. We haven't played this game long enough. Bill, I've already told you already. Alvin is who I want in my life, not you. With that night we had, that was a mistake, Rebecca said. Luke, he's gone, Carlos said. Zeke looked back over to see Carlos standing up. Luke had tears in his eyes before he looked at his friend who was now dead. What a mess. I told you not to follow him, and look where he's dragged you and our daughter. Carver said to Rebecca. But it's okay. We're going home. As a family. Alvin sent a glare towards Carver and bobbed Genevieve in his arms. Carver looked and said, Oh, and by the way, Alvin, George died last night when you escaped. You murdered him. It's only fair if I do the same to you. Alvin's eyes widened as he started to back away. Carver pulled out his gun and aimed at Alvin. No! Clementine exclaimed. She got in front of her adoptive father. Wait, you could still use him for labor. He's the strongest one here, right? A few tense-filled seconds played before Carver lowered the gun. A smile formed on his face. I guess you're right, Clementine. He turned to Alvin and he said, For now you're more useful alive than dead, but we don't get comfortable with it. With the expansion complete, you'll be held accountable for George's death. He then turned to the other guards and he said, Round them up. We're heading home. He made gesture for Clementine to come up to move over to him. Now, Clementine, we have a lot of catching up to do. Clementine then looked at her down with a frown, but she obliged. She knew that there was nothing anyone could do to stop Carver now. What about her? Troy said, gestured to Rebecca. Put her with the others for now. All she could do is cuddle her. Carver said. Bill, no, Rebecca said. Besides, it seems like you have another runt to look after, Carver said. Troy grabbed Rebecca by the arm and proceeded to drag her away. Clementine followed but was stopped by Carver. He grabbed her arm and kept her running. She looked up with terror in her eyes. Don't make me punish you, Carver said to the girl. Bonnie and Troy proceeded to tie the rest of the group up, while Bonnie went over to Luke. Luke, she went over and placed a hand on his shoulder, which he shrugged off. Luke, I'm sorry. I'm never... Bonnie, just shut the fuck up, Luke muttered. Bonnie frowned before she proceeded to get up. I'm sorry, Luke. I never wanted this to happen, Bonnie said. Luke continued to ignore her. Troy walked over and bound the wrists together with some rope. It didn't take long until everyone was tied up, except for Alvin, who was holding Genevieve. With the bags and weapons over on the bench, Nick was left alone at the ski lodge. Zeke knew that he would reanimate and become a walker, since he wasn't shot in the head. Hours later, they were in the back of the truck tied up. It was silent for the most part, except that Alvin and Rebecca continued to help Genevieve with counting in the alphabet. The toddler would get up every once in a while to run around for a bit or so to stretch her legs. Along the journey, Rebecca managed to convince Carver to give her some of Genevieve's supplies and let her be untied. What comes after tea? Rebecca asked the toddler. Oh, Genevieve said. Not quite, Rebecca said. I'll give you a hint. It comes before V. You? Genevieve said. She wasn't so sure if that was right. That's right. Good job, you smarty pants, Rebecca said. Okay, we need something, Kenny said. We need to find a way to get these bindings off of us. Anyone got something sharp? And what's that's gonna do to us? Rebecca asked. What the hell's wrong with you people? We need to get out of here and get Clem back, Kenny said. Kenny, calm down. They took everything from us, and we have to keep a level head, Carlos said. Where's Clem? Genevieve asked. Rebecca looked at her and toddler and she said, I'm sorry, she's not here right now, baby. She's with someone else. Want Clem? Genevieve exclaimed. I know, we all want Clem now, Rebecca said. Frustrated, Genevieve began to cry. Rebecca pulled the toddler and placed her on her lap to comfort her. Shh, it's okay. It's okay, baby, Rebecca said. We can't just sit here and do nothing, Kenny said. The truck must have hit some bumps, which caused the truck to sway a bit. I'm trying to help. Yeah, you helped a whole lot, Zeke said. You almost got me and you got Nick killed. Kenny frowned upon hearing the boy's input. He seemed to be more remorseful for his actions. That's not fair. You're blaming him for the actions of a madman, Sarita said. This madman told him that he needed us to surrender or one of us died, Zeke said, and he ended up choosing to let us die before surrendering. Look, let's just calm down. We can't start turning on each other, Walter said as he turned to Kenny. I understand that Clementine means a lot to you, Kenny, but we need to be smart about this. Let's take the time to come up with a solid plan. We don't have a lot of time. Who knows what crazy bitch is going to do to her, Kenny said. I hate to admit it, but he's right, Alvin said. What pushed us into leaving Carver's community was when he took Clementine to do the gun and knife training. He nearly got her killed if Luke hadn't shown up. Well, I don't even know what to think what would have happened, Alvin said. Damn, we're stuck in the rock in this third place, Matthew said. If we wait to come up with a decent plan to escape, it may be too late for Clementine. But if we rushed a plan to save Clementine and escape, we would be killed. Unfortunately, that is true, Carlos said. Hold on, there has to be something we can do about Vince. He's a good person, Sarah said. Sarah, Vince is with Carver now, Carlos said. The truck rocked again from supposedly hitting some of the bumps and the holes on the road. Maybe, but who knows how long it will remain that way, Zeke said. Carver is becoming increasingly unhinged. If he becomes more deranged, he'll start losing the support of some of his people, especially those who haven't been with him from the beginning. Vince and his people, Sarah said. Right, Zeke said. We're just gonna have to hope that Clem can hold out till then. Who knows how long that will take, Kenny said. If we're going to get out of this mess, then we gotta do it ourselves. The truck must have hit several more bumps, because the vehicle rocked more than normal. We're getting close, Carlos said. Let's just wait till we get there, and then we can figure out a way to escape when we actually know the layout of the community, Walter said. It was silent for a moment, which was followed by a siren that signaled that the truck was backing up. Kenny, please, just listen to them. Rebecca, Alvin, and Luke know more about Carver than anyone else here. Kenny grumbled before he said, Fine, but I don't like this. None of us do. Why else do you think we would have escaped? Carlos said. Rebecca looked over to Luke, who hadn't muttered a word since the whole trip here. Luke, are you all right? Rebecca asked. Luke huffed and he said, Not exactly, but I'll have to get over it. You'd think you'd get used to something like this, losing someone you care about. But you don't, Rebecca said. What if Carver was right back there? If we had stayed here and helped Vince and his people, we would have overthrown Carver. Then maybe Reggie, Connie, Pete, and Nick would still be alive, Luke said. You didn't make that decision on your own. We all backed you. We all made that choice to go, Alvin said. We know the risks involved. Luke looked up again as he was about to respond when the truck slammed into something from outside. It was a rough stop to say the least. Everyone jolted aside with Zeke and Alvin nearly colliding with the truck's back door. Everyone all right? Carlos asked the group as they sat upright. Yeah, I think so, Luke said.